Morning, everyone. Well, yesterday, as the Hurricane Hilary moved through parts of California and then to Nevada, we wake up this morning to see some of the new forecast guidance doing what we thought it could do, which was to take the center of circulation, what's left of it, as it's kind of getting sheared open here, but pull that moisture through Idaho, Montana, and then right through the Canadian prairie. So we're going to be watching as what's left of Hilary gets pulled around a very, very large ridge that's here in the central part of the United States. Now, the impacts over the weekend were quite impressive, and I just want to show you some of the latest satellite data. So this is just as the sun was rising this morning. This is the cloud shield from Hilary, but if we go back and have a look at it yesterday, right away from the beginning of the morning through mid-morning and then late in the afternoon as the sun was setting, the cloud shield has been opened up wide by upper-level wind shear. This is also just what happens when any system like this gets near the west, but under this we saw just a tremendous amount of rain. Now, before I go any further, you can already see the presence of the large ridge in the central United States, and there's actually some pretty hazy and smoky air that's in here. But as I was watching Hilary move through, it was important to keep note of how much smoke is in the atmosphere up here in the Pacific Northwest and parts of British Columbia. So I want to show you that a little closer because the satellite imagery there yesterday was absolutely stunning. Once again, we saw these kind of the smoke getting tucked away into the valleys here in parts of British Columbia after watching very large fires late last week. And so as Hilary's cloud cover starts to put a shield over the top of this, I just watched all day long as there was this tremendously bad air quality due to a trapping temperature inversion in low levels of the atmosphere right here in parts of Washington, Oregon, getting up to northern Idaho, Montana, and British Columbia. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention that this is what's going on still while we've got Hilary bringing moisture and soaking areas just to the east. One of the largest fires we've been watching over the last several days is this one here. And again, you can see it erupting in the afternoon. That is smoke, and this is all clouds. Okay, from here, how about a little bit of an update on precipitation totals? This is the latest I've got through 6 a.m. Central Time on Monday here. And using radar and rain gauge estimations, there are several locations in here that have received well over 6 inches of rainfall. And I'm sure you've all seen the videos of the debris flows, the mudslides that have happened, the rockfall that's happened, and also just the flooded streetways and flooded areas. We do note that part of the Mojave Desert has picked up in some places over 2 years worth of rainfall. And this rain continues to move north into parts of Nevada, and then it will continue, as we saw, to move through this area. What'll be interesting is to see how the Rocky Mountains in Montana play with the flow. So it's coming like this. It's going to hit those mountains perpendicularly, which means you could get some sort of a rain shadow effect on the eastern side of those mountains. But if we zoom in on California and just have a look here at the rainfall totals, just note how heavy it's been. It's largely been driven by elevation. That's what makes the really, really heavy rainfall. You're enhancing the lift in the atmosphere by putting a mountain in the way. And that's why we see these incredible rainfall totals here. But I would like to comment briefly on how this all works, because in Southern California with the mountains and the placement of the radars, you see this very unique behavior right here. Okay, see that? If I'll take that drawing off there, you're going to see some odd features in the radar. You can actually see them up here too. And what's going on here is that the placement of the radars is too close to a nearby large physical barrier like a mountain. So if I take you to the radar in LA, you notice that there's always a sharp line right here and right here where you don't see anything in this area. And that's because the beam is blocked by the mountains. So we have to stitch several radars together in order to make a composite map of where we saw the precipitation. And it's going to leave a lot to be desired because of the lack of good low-level coverage on our radars in areas like this. So rainfall estimates are often, they have large error. In fact, that's a problem throughout the entirety of the West, given the placement of our radars and the proximity to large physical barriers like mountains. So it's just a piece of stuff I want you to know about how we measure precip there. But let's go ahead and have a look at what the main flow looks like, not only here, but also around the Pacific, or around the Atlantic, excuse me. We're watching 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate circulations. We saw the MJO move into the West Pacific. That kind of took the lid off of what was going on here in the Atlantic, and that's allowed these circulations to really begin to show up. And the National Hurricane Center has named 3 of them over the weekend. We have Franklin, Gert, and Emily. The one on the backside here, in fact, let's go to a 7-day graphical outlook. There we go. One on the backside, 70% chance of developing. And as we talked about last week, there is this system that's going to try to sneak through the Gulf of Mexico and get into Texas, southern Texas. Now, I'm Unclear as to whether or not this one will have what it takes to get up to tropical storm status. But I want to show you just a better view of this. This comes from a guy out at Oklahoma University. His name is Tomer. He builds beautiful maps, but this shows you all of them together and where they're going. What I like about it is you can see Franklin, Gert, and Emily getting really influenced by the position of the subtropical ridge known as the Bermuda High. Given that there's a large high-pressure cell here, what develops in the Gulf is going to stay south and move west. But there is no strong pull toward the United States from any of these systems. Very, very low probability that Franklin, for example, influences the east coast of the United States. In the background, you got your ocean temperatures, which have a hard break at 26°C. That is where we have warm enough ocean temperatures to support hurricane development. It's, of course, much, much warmer than that here. So let's go have a look at the main feature. This is the thing that's kind of influencing the whole pattern. It's this large ridge that's in the middle part of the country. It's sitting over parts of Kansas and Missouri today. And here's the circulation to the south by Tuesday morning that will be moving into Texas. Now, this is not Hilary. Neither is this. Hilary's been ripped to shreds through here. These are shortwave troughs off of the west coast of the United States that we're going to keep a close eye on as well. So this ridge, how long is it going to stick around? What kind of potential records is it going to break? Those are all things we need to be looking at here. But before I get any farther, I just want to show you that this is what's going on in the overnight hours with the tropical thunderstorms that are moving through the Gulf of Mexico. There was some early signs of good development, and what I mean by that is the low-level circulation is turning like this. Watch the end of this animation. You see the low-level flow coming in like this. We want to see that counterclockwise flow if you want to get a low to develop. But you see the upper-level flow racing out of it? That's also a healthy sign. But at the very end of this, I started to see that some of the convection lined out. Now, if you just notice right through here, looks as though it produced a bit of a squall line. And that is a disrupting factor to the development of a system. It spreads out the heating. It's kind of not allowing the system to maintain its inner core. So that's why we have some question marks on how quickly it'll develop. And that's why the National Hurricane Center's got it at a 70% chance. Okay, back to the heat in the midsection of the country. Yesterday, the National Weather Service out of Topeka, this is their public Twitter account, of course. I just want to show you that they saw in Lawrence, Kansas, a heat index value of 134. So the temperature was 102, the dew point 84 degrees Fahrenheit, and that on the chart puts us at 134 degrees. That is just incredibly, incredibly hot to think about. And that's why we still have today across a broad section of the country here excessive heat warnings from Texas clear to Wisconsin, Minnesota, and South Dakota. And we're going to watch where this heat goes over the coming days while what's left of Hilary still causes problems with flood warnings, flash flood watches, and advisories here. We have the air quality alerts that are in Oregon and Washington and parts of northern Idaho. And there is still this morning a tropical storm warning out for parts of California. And if I believe, I need to go back and look at the statistics, but I believe this is the first time ever that there has been a tropical storm warning issued here. I will check that, though, to make sure that I've got it right. So I'd make a case that all of this is being driven by that ridge, and it is forecast later today to be well above 600 decameters. This would be, almost approaching 4 standard deviations above the mean, which we talked a lot about last week. As we play throughout this week, can you see what's happening here? Tropical low pressure is interacting with this deeper low here that's set up, near the Canadian Maritimes. There's tropical low pressure to the south of it here while we watch a system roll into Texas. But this ridge is what's blocking anything from the Atlantic getting over. We see shortwave troughs that are sitting off of the west coast. There's one here and there's one here. Well, this one's in the Pacific Northwest, And as we play forward, one of the things that's going to help reinforce that ridge and help move it a little bit farther back to the west by the time we get into the weekend is this high over low setup we see right here. So here's your ridge of high pressure. Here is your area of low pressure to the south. So you notice that by Saturday, the ridge has come out of Missouri, out of Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, and it's moved its way back towards Texas. So the ridge axis runs like this. Now, what does all that mean? That means the flow starts coming in this direction. Deeper trough forms here, which means we should expect a blast of some cooler air after 5 or 6 days of extremely hot conditions here in the midsection of the country. That's by Saturday. Going beyond this, though, there is one thing I want to comment on. Getting out here to next Monday, the 28th, the 29th, and the 30th, so that's Monday through Wednesday of next week. We typically look at flow like this in summer and expect to see clusters of storms roll through this area big time. The ridge has moved back. You can see it right here. That's the main ridge axis. I'll put an arrow on the end of that right in through here. But the problem is that there's no moisture that's forecast to recover into this area during this time period. So you're going to see a week 2 forecast that shows up dry in the Midwest, but while the heat goes back to the western United States. So that's your setup all the way out there about day 9 or 10. We need to take a look at what that's going to do. I want to start with probabilities, all right? So this is the chance over the next 10 days of getting at least an inch of rainfall. And what we note here is that this is where what's left of Hilary is moving through. We've enhanced the rainfall in the Canadian Prairie, and we're going to see this kind of set up as a ring around the bigger ridge that's going to come into the Great Lakes states to get into New England. You see the precip chances improving after the next 5 or 6 days over parts of the southeast. Until then, it'll only be scattered storms in this area with better storm coverage in parts of Florida. This is the tropical system that is south of the big ridge that's going to be in the Gulf of Mexico that moves here, and its moisture will get pulled through the Four Corner states, and we think it's going to get yanked right around into parts of Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa. Last week we saw this trying to get into Illinois. Remember, we were discussing this. On the drier side of this is the chance of getting less than half of an inch of precipitation. Very high in the Red River of the south to the mid-Mississippi River Valley, Ohio Valley, and then back up farther to the north here. This is too tucked into the ridge to get much moisture. I also want to comment on what will be happening in Washington and Oregon. Just note, parts of the Columbia Basin, the Willamette Valley, which are areas that have missed out on rains recently, remain quite dry in this forecast as well. So we'll dissect this a few different ways. This is the newest update from the WPC. So again, we see heavy rains coming from the system here into New Mexico, out of Colorado, and Colorado is on pace for its wettest year on record. You then see what's left of Hilary still providing a lot of rainfall here. We're watching the Blue Mountains, the Northern Rockies, and Idaho to get very, very wet. But then you see how dry we are here. Even though the flow goes over it, it's the Rocky Mountains creating a rain shadow in this area. Better rains in British Columbia and Alberta, through Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and eventually coming into parts of Ontario, right through the Great Lakes. New England's going to be wet as well. A lot of this is going to be scattered and isolated storms in these areas over the next several days. So I want to show you the European model. Let's just get into it here. This is starting early this morning. There we go. That's 7 a.m. this morning. Playing forward, you see what's left of Hilary dumping a lot of rain. I'm just going to watch the Blue Mountains today to see how much rainfall they end up getting. And while that's occurring, this is the kind of disorganized tropical system that moves into southern Texas. Now, last week, the trajectory of this was much farther to the north, like right over the top of Austin, San Antonio. It was expected to make the turn, but that ridge that's here has gotten larger, which has pushed this farther to the south. So now we see it's coming over far southern Texas into Mexico. And then as we play into midweek this week, you can see the storms firing up all along the periphery of that large ridge. Troughs hang out here, so rain coming into British Columbia to help put out some of the fires there. So that's your ring that's setting up. This is Wednesday getting into Thursday. Look at all the isolated storm events happening in Ontario, parts of Quebec, getting into New England, back into parts of the Eastern Corn Belt. We go Friday, Saturday, here's Saturday, and getting into the weekend. So this is partly due to the flow coming around, the flow on the top side, and the position and the strength of the ridge that's in the middle. So some heavy rains possibly coming into this area by the weekend. That takes you all the way out there to next Monday. So if we look at this in total, this is what the European model is putting together. So late this weekend into early next week, okay, keep an eye in this particular area for some heavy rain. I think everything else is pretty well set, the flow coming around that massive ridge here. Okay. So what about week 2? Let's scroll down here and have a quick look at it. This is from the CPC and the European model, and the newest from the GFS. There's a similar story in all of these, except the GFS continues to miss out on these rains in the southeast. Notice how the CPC and the European model have that. Most of this is due to the fact that the flow is going to be highly amplified. Remember, it's going to do something like this, and this jet streak is going to take off into this area, putting this region in the entrance of a jet streak there. And that's why there's better chances of getting some moisture into this region. This is not due to tropical systems at this point. It's tropical moisture, but not a tropical system. But we're going to kind of push this into early September, possibly up to Labor Day, with the risk of staying drier around much of the Midwest here, right in the heart of the Corn Belt. To put this into context, I brought up the month-to-date precipitation ranks by climate district. So this area, which is going to go extremely hot and dry, up to this point in August, have been extremely wet. You notice how we're going to be knocking out some of the drought conditions down here in southern Texas into New Mexico. But there is a larger area in through here, especially getting up toward the Red River Valley over to the lower Mississippi Valley, that's going to stay quite dry. This is part of that Willamette Valley drought I was telling you about up to Seattle. And you can see that we really need some of these rains in the Carolinas and Virginia over here as well, because that is an area that on the latest drought monitor did increase the size of that abnormally dry region. But this is as it stands currently from our U.S. drought monitor. And areas that I'm most worried about going forward would, of course, be Texas, the Pacific Northwest, and what this might mean for the Mississippi watershed levels going into September and October. Last year, they reached near record lows. I think we're going to have a better outlook for this fall. I'll show you the latest updates in a moment, but there's still drought sitting in this area that cannot be ignored. I then want to finish up this discussion by looking at the latest 16 inch or 40 centimeter soil moisture percentile. So again, we're expecting better moisture in through here and in this area later, but this is still going to leave a big chunk of Nebraska, this area in parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, northern Illinois that's been dry. We've seen some drier weather get in here, but lately the topsoil's got plenty of water in it. And we're watching part of this section of the Carolinas too, and the deepest drought area down here in parts of Louisiana. These are all areas just to continue to monitor. I've got unfortunate news for the Pacific Northwest going forward into fall and winter. We'll take a look at that in a few minutes as well. Okay, temperature side of this. So far, month-to-date temperature ranks. The heat has been to the south. The heat has been in the west. Texas is possibly looking at one of its hottest Augusts on record, and you'll see more heat coming into that area. But one of the things I've been paying attention to is the overnight low temperatures, just how hot they've been through part of our cotton belt and throughout the west. Even though it's going to be quite cool now, this is what the month leading up to this point before Hilary looked like. As we watch the really large ridge open up, this is today's high temperatures for Monday. Going from Monday into Tuesday, again, the epicenter of the heat is going to be right here in the western and central Corn Belt, while the west stays cool. So when you think about difference from normal, some places up to 30 degrees above average for this time of year, right in through here. So this is Tuesday getting into Wednesday. These are the temperatures on Thursday, moving a bit farther to the east, getting into Friday. Now remember, this weekend, we've got that front that comes through. Remember, as the ridge backs up, the front dives through, giving us a break on Saturday, getting into Sunday for the midsection of the country. But the heat this whole time period stays on across the south. Now, thinking about all of this, I want to show you these overnight lows, and I want you to focus in on this white contour. That would be where the overnight low temperatures are above 70. So they're certainly above 70 this morning across a large area. This is tomorrow on Tuesday. We know that above 70 overnight lows is very stressful for the crops. They continue to transpire water all night long. We might be having overnight lows in the 80s in parts of Iowa by Thursday morning. This is getting into Friday, and it's not until Saturday till the temperatures start to cool back off again, and there it is on Sunday. So we have about 5 straight days of very hot temperatures where the crops are very sensitive to these warm overnight lows in the midsection of the country. How long does that heat last? Well, this is your next 5 days. Let's play it out there day 5 through 10, which parks it right here. That's when the broader trough sets up. We cool off much of the Great Lakes, New England, and parts of the eastern Corn Belt. The south stays hot. The west stays hot. Remember, this is that high over low setup. So if you get the atmosphere doing this, we tend to get cooler weather into the interior and south, but heat bullet pulling into British Columbia. Now beyond this, you're going to watch the heat open back up in the midsection of the country. And I think this is something we're going to see a lot of in the month of September, just warmer conditions here than had been previously forecast. So what's driving all of this? Well, let's finish this up. I'm going to talk to you about the longer range and the new international weather updates I think are important. First of all, the Southern Oscillation Index. Okay, if you look at the values of this index, remember we need to get down here below -7 to see that the atmosphere is behaving like El Nino. It's been spending a lot of time at -11 to -13 for the last several days, and it's still down there this morning. So what that's doing is that's helped promoting the flow in the low levels of the atmosphere to allow upwelling in this area. Not upwelling, the water to slosh back. There's westerly wind bursts, forgive me there. And that's why we've seen these ocean temperatures now perk up. They're up there around 1.2 degrees C above average in the middle of the Pacific. And out here they are up to 5 degrees C above average. The Atlantic's still very, very warm. this pocket of what we call the negative Pacific meridional mode, it's shrinking. Warmer water has pushed into the west coast, and this is going to be our main setup for the late summer and fall time period. So what do we do with that? Well, this is the newest update from the European model, released just yesterday, on the precipitation anomalies for the month of September. We've commented on how the model's drying through here, but we cannot make an accurate estimation on this going forward because of our hurricane season. So this is an area we don't want to rely on the models for. But notice how wet the Canadian prairie is and how we don't have strong signals in between of being overly dry. That's an important thing to think about. On the temperature side of it, the European model has been warm like this since it's been run for September. And that is one area that we've now seen the Climate Prediction Center make kind of a bit of a budge on. So this is their new outlook for week 3, week 4. Remember last time this was all cooler, and now we start to see them building in some warmer conditions farther and farther to the north. If I got to make an adjustment on this, I would just bring this warmth a bit farther to the north than what they're suggesting here. All right. Now, the precipitation side of it, I do agree with. I think that we're going to see wetter conditions in this area. It's echoed in the European model as well. And the flow, whenever you get into an El Nino late summer, does indicate better chances for storms in this area. But as we talked about last week, they also updated their 1-month outlook for September. So here's just another quick look at that. And then their 3-month outlook for fall. And remember, we expect, we expect September to be warm, but October to bring in much colder air on the backside. That is historically consistent. We'll bring that up again as I finish this up. But this is the new thing I want to get into here. They released this on August 17th as well. The big area I'm concerned about going into this winter is the Pacific Northwest. And that's because the jet stream, whenever there's an El Nino, tends to split around the west. It comes into California. It races across the south. But we could watch a real weak start to the wet season in the Pacific Northwest. Outside of that, this is an interesting change. They're expecting drought to persist now through November. And I think there actually is better chances of moisture here than being indicated. Okay. All right. Last couple of pieces. We talked about this last week. The long-range model forecast, the most aggressive of all of them, is the Bureau of Meteorology on this El Nino. But if we have El Nino conditions lasting through fall into winter and spring, we do have a bit of evidence as to what that might do. So I want to show you something. This is the September historical outlook when we had El Nino events developing and what the temperatures did. We were a bit cooler in the west, but warmer across much of the eastern half of the country. That then flipped. Let me go show you this real quick. Sorry. Let's go back here and make this in October. That flipped in October and went over cooler. Now, don't let the color bar frighten you. I mean, this is just 1 degree colder than average, but that's significant. We have to watch it. So I do think that September and October are not going to look like each other when we get out this far. I will show you this. Let's just take September and October together and flip this over to the precipitation, looking at the historic correlations. And what we do notice here is that we were wetter in the Midwest, wetter in the South through Mid-South, and that is a signal that is kind of right now against what the longer range forecast I just showed you from the European are. All right, last thing I want to talk about, some international weather. You've probably heard about the ships that are all stuck trying to get through the Panama Canal. So the Panama Canal is right here. And if you look over the last 3 months, this area is in extreme drought. And so I just wanted to verify what some of the news stories were saying this weekend about why those ships were unable to get. There's a large lake in here that's critical to the height of each of the locks and the dams. And that area has been under extreme drought pressure as of late. Well, extreme and severe drought pressure over the recent time frame here over summer. All right, last thing I want to show with you. This is the newest update from the European weeklies. Now, this is something I got to watch. If there's a developing El Nino, the monsoon is typically late inside of that oval. But the European weeklies are suggesting that September rainfall could be above average. Now, how much above average? Well, these values are down here in like the 10 to 20 millimeter range. So they need to get somewhere north of like 100 millimeters to really crank on the growing season getting going here. But they can start on September the 15th. What we do note is that it's been forecast wet in southern Brazil and even at times into Argentina, although you don't see it in this forecast. And so the big question becomes, what will this upcoming fall look like? If the dryness stays in the Amazon and we get better rains that come through a big section of Brazil, then they're going to get going on this growing season fast. And if you just say, well, if we run a line here and say south of this, how much of the growing area is here, and north of it, what do we have? We probably have about almost 60% of the growing area having better, wetter than normal conditions showing up here in the forecast, with the other 40% being drier farther to the north. But a big section of Mato Grosso is in there. So I just wanted to bring that up so we can watch this together. Thank you for hanging on with a little bit of a longer video this morning, but we had a lot to cover, and I look forward to talking again tomorrow morning. Thanks.